Hey guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kendall Dupuis. I am a business owner, writer, podcaster, and I am a college student going through for my accounting degree. So currently starting my first year here, and I wanted to kind of share everything as I'm learning it and, give you some valuable information. So I started my last video with talking about critical thinking skills and why I think it's so incredibly important to practice and enhance these skills right now. And we're going to continue that with getting some tools on things like logical fallacies with some examples and how to identify it in your real life so that you can start thinking more critically and, being true to your true feelings, intentions, all the good stuff that's behind that. So as promised, here's logical fallacies. First up, we have hasty generalizations. Now, this happens when somebody bases their argument without sufficient evidence and they're just talking in general terms. So say, for example, somebody was bitten by two German Shepherd dogs in their lifetime, and they came up to you and said, hey, German Shepherds are vicious. Obviously, that is not true. There are many well-behaved German Shepherds who will not bite you. That is a hasty generalization, and you should be aware of that. Next up is a non sequitur. Now, this happens when somebody's conclusion isn't necessarily a logical result of the facts. So say, for example, people like beaches. Beaches have sand. Therefore, you should put sand in your home so that people will like to visit more often. Sorry. Begging the question. So this happens when someone presents as truth what is not proven through the argument. So this would be like, the Bible is true because it says it's true. Not enough. Next is up, the slippery slope. Now, this is a form of reasoning that depends on imagining extreme hypotheticals to discredit an argument or perspective. For example, if we allow students to use calculators during math class, then all of a sudden, they're not even going to learn how to do basic mathematics. And then eventually, they won't even be able to think for themselves. And then society is going to crumble because nobody knows how to do mathematics anymore. Next up is the red herring. Now, this happens when they intentionally bring up an irrelevant point to divert your attention from the actual issue. So an example of this would be, say you're having an argument with your boyfriend. He left the toilet seat up. He says, hey, you left your makeup sitting on the counter. Okay, technically he's not wrong, but that is irrelevant to the point that I just brought up. So next up is the ad hominem. Now, this happens when somebody, instead of engaging with the actual argument or debate, they instead insult or attack the opponent's character. So I'm going to use an example from the 2016 presidential election when Donald Trump referred to Senator Marco Rubio as Little Marco. Instead of actually debating on his policies or his position, he instead attacked his character by trying to insult his height and used a derogatory name. Next up is either or. Now, this is pretty straightforward. It's when somebody tries to convince somebody else that there are only two sides to an argument, a right side and a wrong side. So you can see this in a lot of propaganda, but especially in examples of, like, if you do not support this war effort, then you are not a patriot. Fails to recognize that it is also patriotic to not want a war. So next is hypostatization. Now, this one, I feel like almost all of us are probably guilty for it. I know I am personally. It can just be so ingrained into our language and the quips and common sayings that we've heard. Anyways, so it is when you take an abstract concept and apply it as if it were a concrete reality. So for example, history will judge us harshly for our actions. So the problem with that is that history is treated as a sentient entity as opposed to a collection of events interpreted by our own moral judgment. And it changes so much from person to person, culture to culture. We can't decide what that judgment will be because A lot of people also look back at history and say, hey, I understand why they've made these decisions, even if it wasn't necessarily the most wise. We do have that empathetic understanding too. So it's just a very unclear depiction of what the actual reality is, and can make you feel more judged or like more full of shame because of it, and that's often how it's used. Next up is the bandwagon appeal. Now, this is when somebody tries to validate their argument by saying that everybody else believes in this. So, for example, all the cool kids are doing it, why aren't you? Next up is the straw man. So this happens when somebody picks their opponent's weakest or most insignificant point to argue against in order to divert your attention away from the actual point. So for example, say somebody was arguing and said, listen, we need some more regulations towards gun ownership so we can ensure safety. And the straw man response would be, so what, you want to take away everybody's gun and leave everybody defenseless? Not what they said. Next up is the faulty analogy. Now, this is when somebody uses an extended comparison to prove their point. So, for example, banning cars to reduce pollution is like banning spoons to reduce obesity. It's an unnecessary overreaction. Then we have the quick fix. So this happens when somebody leans too heavily on catchy phrases and empty slogans. So I know we can think of a couple right now, and I'm gonna go with the "if you don't like it, leave" comment. So this is often used to shut down dissent, and it doesn't actually engage with the underlying issues or offer a practical solution. Okay, well, thank you guys for hanging out with me through that. I want to express that this is not an exhaustive list of logical fallacies. There are obviously more, and there's more examples. I hope that the ones that I gave you were applicable so that you could think about in how your daily life you're encountering these. Again, critical thinking is so crucial so that you can identify what's being said, identify the half-truths or lies behind it, and be able to actually think and speak for yourself. I hope that you gained something from this, and if you continue along this journey with me, I'm sure that we will both be learning more together. So thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last little bit. If you have any questions, obviously I will be here and do my best to answer as practically as possible. And yeah, hope you guys take care. Start thinking about these, and these are your tools. Use them to your advantage, because you deserve truth, honesty, integrity, all the good virtues. So you guys take care. I will be back with some more helpful information just regarding life and things that I think everybody should know, and practical ways to actually implement them into your routines. So yeah, you guys take care. Thank you again, and I will be around.